Good evening. How are you? Well, it's 99 degrees out and it's quite oppressive. And my adventure to try to do this suggested that by the end of an hour or so, which is longer than I do my walk and talk, I might be lying on the ground instead. It was so bad out. So I've had to do, as I am now, doing a sit and talk. The, the news of the day that prompts me to feel it's necessary to talk about this is how Trump today proved how he could be both so bigoted and in the open and with a strategy. So let's talk a little bit. You probably heard what he said. He said today he didn't know that Kamala Harris was black until a number of years ago when she happened to turn black. He went on to say, and now she wants to be known as black. And he said this before the National Association of Black Journalists. So he chose a forum that was calculated to get the maximum exposure. But let's talk a little bit more about how this latest lie plays into his political mechanism to divide America and to make it difficult for us to find a way out of his chaos, although I think we're doing a good job. And this extreme effort, I think, shows how effective Kamala has been in their poll numbers, so that he has to try to find some way to beat down her standing. I think he's only going to energize the base. Certainly, I feel angry, and I'm not a person of color. And a lifetime of caring and believing in the fact and law that we are all equal to each other and no one is above the law is part of that. But the other part is how people suffer when there is discrimination based on race. But in Kamala's case, you have to know that she went to Howard University. She's thought of herself as black as well as Asian her whole life. And she was active in a sorority. And I'm familiar with the sorority because we have the local chairman of our Board of Supervisors in Loudoun County is from that sorority. And it is a marvelous conjoining of persons of color who know that there's a discrimination to overcome in this world to be all that you can be, if you want to borrow from the Marines. And if there was a challenge for women of color and women generally, it is to be all that they can be and not to be separated and pressed down. Now, so is she black? Her father was black. Her mother was Asian. They talk of her as a DEI candidate, trying to put her down. But she's more than that when you look at her resume and you see who she is. Also in this interview, as I understand it, Trump said that, and he said he thought that this made him one with blacks in America because those who are coming across the border are taking, listen carefully, black jobs. And he was upset at the ABC interviewer that she went right into a question and there was no, hello, how are you kind of stuff. I would find it hard to be in the same room, but if I were and I had a function as this reporter did, this correspondent did, I think I would proceed the way that she did. I think many of us would, but I don't think it matters how you begin. You're there for an interview, you directly ask a question. So he was insulted at the question, but of course, he's soiled to be there. He's already a king in his mind, and that's what distresses him. Also, I think he's very anxious that what Kamala is doing is put him back on his feet, back on his heels, and he's trying to find a way to fight back. Now, this goes to what really is happening here. He has to know that this is highly offensive, that it's discrimination, that it reveals who he is. And he wants that. This is the culmination of a party under Lincoln, whom he quoted and said he was the best for the blacks since Lincoln, who fought to free the slaves, whereas Trump plainly seeks to limit and disengage them from a role in the community. Now, this didn't happen overnight. We had Goldwater, we had Nixon, we had Reagan, we had the W's, well, senior and child. But we've reached a point where Trump has taken it to a whole new level. No more winks. He wants to be standing in the street, waving a flag, saying, "Take back America," because, and point at the blacks, or point at Jews, or point at whatever group he wants. Point at people who believe in something else, that is, that they're homosexual, LGBTQ, anybody in that community. So Trump is betting on a racist voter. Trump is acknowledging that the core of his supporters are racist. Now, he's chosen a peculiar time because women, without regard to race, were already quite upset with the Supreme Court he created that withdrew a right of a woman's dominion over herself, her right to be let alone, to make her own judgments. And now we see as the ticket comes together, they would limit it further. Women barefoot in a kitchen, dropping children on the floor without going to the hospital. I'm thinking of satirical representations across time of how many societies have thought of women, wrongly so. So we have that. And it is clear that Trump and this transition to the hell he would create is a function of this ever-growing discrimination. I apologize for the sound in the background. Some people just never know when to call. So it's a policy with no more winks. What are we doing here? It's standing there shouting to the rafters to summon the people to this horrible, horrible vision of America. So this is the year of the woman, but it's also the year of persons of color. As kids, we saw hoses turned on persons of color, on blacks. We saw whites sit with blacks who were otherwise refused a place at a food counter in a public store. We saw how blacks were refused access to the vote. We saw how people who went to organize for votes, freedom workers, were killed. There are 3 famous freedom workers that the FBI was asked to find and did, and found them in that situation. We can go on. People have. There are books about it. There were sticks. There were broken heads. There was blood. There were bogus arrests of the people that were being abused, who were injured and even dead. That's Trump's America. That's what he wants. Because his revolution is a revolution of the single white male individual. And if women cleave and agree to the subservience that Trump wants, fine, you're welcome. And if you will say publicly as a woman or black what is necessary to advance our monarchical control of America so that 4 years from now, Catholics don't need to vote anymore, nor anyone. If we are not careful and continue the fight, then we will have a situation in which there will not be any voting, but there also will be no freedom. This nation has worked hard and long among its people, among changes. Some people talk about generational changes. This is not a generational change. This is a battle that has gone from the moment the first whimper of this nation until now. And we have made great advances. And it's not that we're not going back. We're going to a new future, a future without this kind of politics, without this kind of discrimination, without this kind of hit and run atmosphere. Trump is the author of the downfall of this republic if we let him. But we're not going to. This Hail Mary pass, if I may be so bold as to invoke this, of outright discrimination and racism and bias and insults to a community that's invited him to explain how he could be good for those people attending. It's all part of his hurt. The hurt that he needs to scare people and coerce them into going his way. When somebody tells you, oh, he was a great president, a lot of them are talking about their bottom line without regard for all the other people in America who don't have that bottom line to assure them. And there's an agenda in one hand that they perhaps released prematurely that tells us exactly the horrors of what a Trump administration would be. Not a rerun, no. A quite dramatic upturning of this still young democracy. So those are a couple of thoughts I have today. I realize as I think about what I've just said, it's both grim, but it also has opportunity. The opportunity because of the time we have to support Kamala Harris and whomever she chooses as her vice president, to fight every inch of the way, every day from now until November the 5th, and after that, if and as we must. And those who are concerned about what the Republicans might do when they lose an election to confound the process, keep in mind that this time the incumbent will be Biden. And it's going to be hard to mismanage, misdirect, and wrongly and criminally use the government to take over the government, though he has lost again in another election. We see the future in his selection of a vice president. It's a very sad, but there's no room for sadness. It is a hateful thing. I don't profess to be angry, but there's a scar on this nation that this man has ever existed and been elected to the presidency. We cannot allow it to happen again. There have been very important elections in American history. There have been entanglements with foreign nations that have compromised us. Some are in these days talking about how Nixon cooperated with foreign nationals to help secure his election. And Reagan did the same. But Trump has taken it to a whole new level with his association with the dictators around the world. So our challenge is a great one, but we're in a position. We're ready to go forward. We're ready to fight this through November, and we will if we just keep on the matter. So that's what I got to say, and hopefully tomorrow, although the weather reports are that it's going to be a miserable end of the week, and there are more wells failing and farmers in distress because of the drought we have, and the rains have not come, although we did have one yesterday. So be well, think of what I had to say, do what you can, do only what you can, and keep saying about this, because they hope to get us crazy and to use us being crazy to get their people who are already nuts to get the maggots going. So, good evening. Talk to you tomorrow.